Howdy, Space Rangers, Captain Phoenix here, and today we're back with another and probably my last Andor video. Now, if you remember my previous video, I mentioned I wanted to talk about something specific about Andor, something that would have been too long for the last video and would have derailed my review, but still a topic of interest nonetheless. This is that video. Today, I want to talk to you about the lack of the Force in Andor. And no, it's not going to be the typical talking point you've heard about before of, oh, it's not really Star Wars if it doesn't have the Force, blah, blah, blah. No, none of that. I want to give this conversation some nuance from my perspective. I talk about how the lack of the Force in Andor is both a benefit and detriment to its storytelling. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Now, like a good chunk of the fan base, I rewatched Rogue One right after watching Andor to see how well the story flowed and to check if Andor enhanced my Rogue One experience. Long story short, it did. I like Rogue One a whole lot more now than I did when it first came out. Krennic, for example, became a much more interesting villain to follow. Andor is more of an actual character, the dread of the Death Star feels heavier, and Saw is an even worse scumbag than I remember. However, some of my enjoyment was also independent of Andor, such as the battles, especially the third act, the themes of hope and good versus evil, Vader,
Director Krennic. Lord Vader. You seem unsettled.
No, just pressed for time. There's a great many things to attend to.
My apologies. You do have a great many things to explain.
and of course, the world building. This 2-hour movie surprisingly had a lot of depth for its world. And of this world building, my favorite aspect about it was the lack of a safety blanket. The lack of the Jedi, so to speak. What do I mean by this? Rogue One shows, not through dialogue, but through visuals and world building, that the Jedi are gone and have been disavowed by the galaxy, being nothing more than a distant memory. There are no heroes coming in to save the day or keep the peace, cause they are all dead. You really feel that this world has lost its safety blanket. The galaxy needs new, powerless heroes to step up, and that is what Rogue One and Andor show, the average Joe taking up arms to fight oppression and subjugation. The cherry on top is at the end of Rogue One, when everything's at its boiling point, we do get a fully Force-sensitive being, but it's the complete opposite of what you expect. Instead of it being a Jedi, someone who would represent hope for the galaxy and the rebellion, it's instead a Sith, the Iron Fist that represents the darkness and tyranny of the Empire. This is where the two projects diverge. While Rogue One captures all of these themes in its 2 hours, Andor doesn't in its 24 episodes. Andor does show regular people struggling to build something in a world that's against them, but it doesn't emphasize the impact or importance of the Jedi through their absence. Now, before I critique it, I just want to be forward and say that there is good in this. I didn't need Andor to reference the Jedi or their disappearance in every episode, and what it did in its world building is already pretty solid. With Andor, you're immediately thrown into a world that is dystopian and crooked. There's a subtle sense of desperation that boils over the course of the season. The more we see the dark side of the Empire, the more we understand and emphasize with the need to stand up. I cannot tell you how many times during my watch through where I thought to myself, you know what, a Jedi would have been really useful in this scenario. And compare how quiet the protagonists in this show are and have to be to how loud everything was in the prequels. There were Jedi everywhere there. The whole Clone Wars was about them fighting to keep the peace and prevent the galaxy from falling to ruin. These are the stories of old that should have heard as legends in other fantasy settings. Or you know, the first movie. But we as Star Wars fans were able to see everything fall apart and the events leading up to that fall. Then look at Andor again. The Jedi of old would not have allowed things to get this bad if they were still around. But because of their initial clouded judgment, they did. It really puts into perspective why Palpatine needed them out of the picture and how things went to crap without them. Don't get me wrong, I love Rebels to death. It's no secret on this channel, but you never really thought that everything could be undone with Kanan and Ezra around. Yeah, they lacked all the teachings the classic Jedi had, but they were capable enough to keep the rebellion and its idea alive. Andor and Rogue One don't have that, which I think plays to Rogue One's strength. The reason why I say it is as much a detriment to Andor as it is a potential strength is because every praise I gave Andor earlier is inferred, as in you wouldn't come to this mindset by simply watching the show. You'd have to pull from different projects. I know I said Andor didn't need to mention Jedi in every episode, but some acknowledgement, even once, would have helped the show go down well with a good chunk of fans and open the door to other projects for new audiences. Andor barely addresses the Force as a concept and doesn't even mention the Jedi, making everything I just talked about fall on deaf ears for non-fans. This is the other end of the sword. As a show, it's great, and as I mentioned in my previous video, it's a wonderful critique of fascism. But some Star Wars fans may see it as disconnected from the other stuff because it barely references the other stuff or the thing that...
An energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us, penetrates us, it binds the galaxy together.
It's set in a great time period, showcasing the Empire's evil, but doesn't give you that sense of lost heroes or light. Rogue One instills that loss. You get the sense that the galaxy was better once upon a time ago, and that these new heroes, these rebels, want to bring it back. It showcases what so much of the Jedi were without having a single one pop up. New audiences watching Andor wouldn't know what the freak a Jedi is. What they'd see for the most part is an espionage/political thriller/commentary about an evil government, which is fine, but it lacks those background details that Rogue One had. That sauce. This has been one of my biggest issues with Andor since the beginning. Season 1 didn't reference the Force at all, which initially made me pissed, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that's not what this show was going for. So, I redirected my expectations to not want to see it at all for Season 2. But then, Season 2 came along and actually introduced it by talking about destiny and everyone's path. But when they finally did that, it just felt shoehorned in and not a part of the world like it was in Rogue One, which threw me off personally. And that's why I consider this a disadvantage to both me and Andor. Because there's no mention of the days before the dark times in Andor, I feel media illiterate and crazy for bringing it up and seeing things that aren't there. Andor didn't need the Force to be great, but it felt like it could have benefited so much if it made you feel that loss instead of pretending it doesn't exist. And I can understand why some people may be ticked off because of that. The show is still good regardless, but I wouldn't blame anyone if they say it's lacking a bit of the sauce. Of course, the show is now over and there's little or change about the final product, but I do want to say this for all future Star Wars projects going forward, whether they focus on the Jedi or not. The Force is in all living things. Let us also experience it when it or the light is gone. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is Andor's double-edged sword, or lightsaber if you want to be cheeky with it. Anyways guys, that's going to be all from me today. Tell me, what do you guys think of this read? Is my analysis onto something, or am I just huffing the Rhydonium and I'm completely media illiterate? What do you think of the Force's absence in Andor? Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, let's have a discussion. Thank you guys so very much for watching. Be sure to like if you like, subscribe if you haven't already, hit that notification bell to be on our team, leave a comment down below, slap a cow, and with that, I will see you in another universe. Goodbye, my Rangers.